Snow whispered against the windows like a prayer no one dared to finish. The night had that particular stillness that only winter knows, where even the wind seems to hold its breath, and every sound carries the weight of something about to change. Officer Silas Wren guided his horse through the empty stretch beyond Winter's Hollow, the lantern hanging from his saddle swaying with each step. The world was white and endless, and for a man like him, that kind of quiet was both a comfort and a curse. He used to find peace in nights like these. Before the accident, before the house felt like a tomb and his daughter's laughter became something the walls only remembered. Now he patrolled not because he had to, but because he couldn't bear to stay still. The snow muffled everything, and he let it, until a sound cut through. A soft whimper, too fragile to belong to anything but the living. Silas reined in his horse. The sound came again, closer this time. A small, broken cry that was neither fully human nor animal. He dismounted, the snow crunching under his boots, breath rising in clouds that vanished before they could mean anything. The beam of his lantern trembled across the trees until it caught movement. A flicker of pale fabric and the dull shine of fur. A girl knelt beside a fallen log, shivering so hard her teeth chattered. She couldn't have been more than 7, maybe 8. In her arms was a dog, a golden retriever, limp but breathing, its muzzle marked with a long, healed scar. The girl's lips were blue, but her arms refused to let go. When she lifted her face toward him, her voice was so faint it barely made it through the snow. "Can I keep that dog, Daddy?" The word struck him harder than the cold. For a second, the world tilted. The memory of another voice, his daughter's, echoing through the years. The same tone, the same fragile hope. He froze, fingers tightening around the lantern handle until his knuckles burned white. "I'm not your—" He stopped himself. The words felt cruel in his mouth. The girl looked down, thinking she'd done something wrong. The dog whimpered again, as if begging him to choose his next breath carefully. Silas crouched, studying them both. The child's hands were raw, her dress threadbare, her shoes soaked through. "Whoever she was, she wouldn't last an hour out here. Come on," he murmured. "Let's get you warm." She hesitated, clutching the animal tighter, but he held out a gloved hand. Slowly she took it. The dog lifted its head as if testing his scent, then let out a weak sigh. Silas wrapped his coat around the girl and carried her to his horse. The dog pressed against his side. By the time they reached his cabin, the wind had picked up, whirling snow against the windows like restless spirits. The girl sat near the fire, wrapped in a wool blanket so large it nearly swallowed her whole. The dog lay beside her, asleep, chest rising unevenly. Steam lifted from its fur in soft curls. Silas poured water into a tin cup, watching the girl from across the room. She was all bones and silence, her gaze fixed on the fire as if afraid it might disappear. He handed her the cup. She took it with both hands and whispered a thank you without looking up. "What's your name?" he asked. She shrugged, voice barely a thread. "Elsie, I think." "You think?" "That's what the lady at the orphan train said once, before she forgot me." He felt that sentence more deeply than he wanted to. "And the dog?" She looked down at the golden retriever, now sleeping peacefully. "He doesn't have one. But he came back for me. He always does." Silas didn't ask what she meant. He'd learned long ago that not every story could be told right away. He fetched some stew from the stove and set it in front of her. She ate slowly, like someone who had learned to make food last. When she finished, she leaned against the dog and closed her eyes. For a long time, Silas just sat there, watching the fire paint gold across their faces. The room, once filled with ghosts, felt almost alive again. The chair across from him, empty for years, seemed less like a wound and more like a memory easing into place. But morning would come, and with it, the town's questions. He could already hear Deputy Finn's voice echoing through the office. "The sheriff's gone soft, bringing home strays now." Winter's Hollow didn't take kindly to the unknown. People here built walls around their lives, thick as the snowdrifts that buried the fences. When dawn broke, he saddled the horse again and rode into town. The streets were slick with frost, chimney smoke curling into the pale light. Martha Doone, the innkeeper, watched him from her porch, her shawl pulled tight. "That girl yours, Silas?" she called, eyes sharp with curiosity, but softened by something else. He paused, jaw tightening. "No, just helping her for now." "For now," she repeated, the words heavy with meaning. Funny thing about kindness, it never stays temporary. Inside the sheriff's office, Finn leaned against the desk, smirking. "Heard you picked up a kid in a mutt. That true?" Silas ignored him, shuffling papers that didn't need sorting. "Town's talking," Finn added. "Says maybe you're losing your edge." Silas looked up, voice calm but cold. "Let them talk. The law's not just for the easy cases," Finn scoffed. Or the living, apparently. The words hung in the air, bitter as the wind that slipped under the door. Silas turned away, but the remark lodged itself deep. He rode home slower that evening, the sky bruised with storm clouds. The closer he got, the more he realized he wasn't dreading the gossip. He was dreading what the girl and the dog were already doing to him. Elsie greeted him with a smile that seemed too fragile for this world. She was brushing Hollow's fur with an old comb she'd found near the hearth. The dog wagged its tail lazily, pressing against her side. The fire burned low, throwing long shadows against the walls. "I made soup," she said shyly. "It's not very good, but Hollow liked it." He almost laughed. The sound caught in his throat, but not from sadness. More like surprise. "You'll fit in here fine if you can keep that one fed." She beamed, then turned serious. "Do you think he'll get better?" Silas knelt beside the dog, checking its paw. The wound was healing. "I think he already is." Something about that answer made her relax, and she rested her head on Hollow's shoulder. The dog lifted his gaze toward Silas, amber eyes soft but steady. There was recognition in them. Or maybe Silas only imagined it. He reached out and touched the dog's neck, feeling the slow, steady heartbeat beneath his fingers. That night, after Elsie had fallen asleep on the rug, Silas stood at the window. The snow outside glowed faintly under the moonlight. Every breath fogged the glass, and in the reflection, he saw not the broken man he'd been, but someone just beginning to thaw. He turned back to the fire. Hollow stirred, as if sensing the change. "For the first time in years," Silas whispered into the silence, "you did good, boy. You found her." The dog's tail thumped once against the floor, slow and deliberate. When the last ember flickered out, Silas realized something had shifted. Something quiet, but undeniable. The house no longer felt haunted. It felt waiting. The kind of waiting that promised a story wasn't over yet, only pausing before it decided what kind of miracle it wanted to become. The storm rolled in without warning, a heavy white silence that swallowed the world whole. By dusk, the sky had folded into itself, and the wind screamed through the valley like an old soul remembering pain. Silas fastened the shutters, the flame of the lantern trembling against the glass. Inside, the cabin was warm but restless. The fire snapped, the kettle hissed, and Hollow paced near the door, uneasy. Elsie sat cross-legged by the hearth, humming softly to the dog as though her voice could calm what the wind outside could not. Silas watched her from the table, polishing his badge by habit rather than need. The rhythm soothed him, but his mind kept circling the same question. Where had she come from? Her story was too thin, her fear too deep. There were truths behind her silence, and he could feel them, like thunder before lightning. He thought of asking again, but every time she looked up with those tired eyes, the words died in his throat. Hollow stopped pacing and growled low, a sound that came from some memory the dog couldn't let go of. Silas's hand stilled. "Easy, boy," he murmured. But the growl didn't fade until Elsie stood and pressed her palm against the retriever's neck. "He remembers things," she said quietly. "Sometimes it hurts him." Outside, snow began to fall harder. Silas stepped closer to the window, peering through the narrow slit between boards. The world had disappeared into a white blur, the kind that erased paths, fences, even homes. He turned to Elsie. "We might be snowed in for a while." She nodded, unbothered. "It's okay. Hollow likes storms." Her calmness unsettled him. "You don't?" "I'm used to them," she whispered. Later, as night deepened, the storm pressed harder against the walls, moaning through the cracks. Silas added wood to the fire, and for a while, they sat in quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like the world's holding its breath. Hollow slept near the fire, paws twitching as if he were running in dreams. Elsie reached out and smoothed his fur, her small hand moving slowly, rhythmically, like she was trying to soothe something in herself as much as in him. Silas took a breath. "Elsie," he said, voice low, "you said Hollow always comes back for you. What did you mean?" She hesitated, her fingers stilling on the dog's coat. "We were in a wagon once," she said finally, the words thin as smoke. "There was snow like this. Mama said it would be fine, but then the horses slipped. Everything was loud and cold. When I woke up, Hollow was beside me. Everyone else was gone." Her voice trembled on that last word. Gone. Silas swallowed hard. He'd heard that story before. Years ago, when his wife's sister and her husband were reported missing in a storm north of the Hollow. The wreckage had been found, but not the child. His wife had cried for days, holding a scarf that matched the one Elsie now wore around her neck. He leaned forward. "Your mama's name. Do you remember it?" Elsie frowned, trying to recall. "Clara," she said after a pause. "Clara May." The name hit him like a blow. He gripped the arm of the chair to steady himself. Clara May, his wife's sister. That meant the girl in front of him wasn't just a stray. She was blood, the child they'd mourned and buried without ever finding. He looked at her differently now, not just with pity, but with recognition. Hollow stirred, lifting his head as though he could feel the shift in the air. His eyes met Silas's, and in them was something almost human. The dog limped to the corner of the room, sniffing near an old cabinet. Then with a low bark, he pawed at the drawer. Silas opened it slowly. Inside lay a folded piece of cloth. His daughter's red scarf, untouched since the day she died. Hollow pressed his nose against it, tail wagging once, softly. Silas turned to Elsie, heart hammering. "Where did you find him?" "He found me," she said, "in the snow, after Mama didn't wake up. He led me all the way here." The words carried a kind of magic and sorrow that defied explanation. Hollow, the lost dog of his wife's family, had somehow found his way through the wilderness and back to the one man who'd lost everything. And in his wake, he'd brought a child who carried both memory and second chances. But before Silas could speak, the wind outside roared loud enough to shake the shutters. The fire guttered. Hollow barked sharply and ran to the door. "Stay here," Silas ordered, pulling on his coat. The moment he cracked the door open, a blast of ice-cold air punched through the room. Hollow bolted into the whiteout, his form vanishing within seconds. "Wait!" Elsie screamed, darting after him. "Elsie!" Silas lunged, but she slipped past him, her small figure swallowed by snow. He cursed under his breath and followed, the wind slicing through every layer he wore. The night was chaos, whirling snow, howling gusts, and no sense of direction. He called her name, but the wind tore it away. His lantern flickered, then died. For a moment, panic clawed at him. Then he saw it, a faint glow in the distance like the shimmer of a dying flame. He pushed toward it, feet sinking deep with every step. The glow grew clearer. A hollow beneath a fallen pine, shielded from the storm. Hollow was there, curled protectively around Elsie. She was shaking, eyes wide but alive. Silas dropped to his knees beside them, wrapping his coat around both. "You shouldn't have come out here," he said, voice breaking. She looked up, tears freezing against her cheeks. "I couldn't let him go." He pulled her close, the dog pressed between them, its body warm and trembling. For a long moment, none of them moved. The world outside raged on, but within that small shelter, everything felt still, suspended between loss and salvation. "You found us, didn't you, boy?" Silas whispered to Hollow, who blinked slowly, tail thudding once against the snow. "You brought her home." The dog gave a faint whine and rested his head on Silas's arm. And there, in the storm's heart, something inside Silas finally let go. The grief, the guilt, the endless winter of his own making. He held the girl tighter, feeling her heartbeat against his chest, and in that fragile rhythm was the sound of life returning. By dawn, the storm had passed. The world lay quiet and new, blanketed in light. Silas carried Elsie back to the cabin, Hollow trotting weakly behind. Inside, the fire still smoldered, waiting for them. He set Elsie by the hearth, rubbing warmth into her hands. When she opened her eyes, they met his with something that looked like trust. "Are we family now?" she asked softly. Silas smiled, the kind that started slow and stayed. "We always were. We just didn't know it yet." Hollow curled up beside them, sighing deeply. The morning sun broke through the window, melting thin lines of frost. For the first time in years, Silas felt the air move through the room not as a ghost, but as breath shared and alive. Later, when Martha Dune came to check on them, she paused at the doorway, watching the scene, the man, the girl, the dog, all three framed by golden light. She didn't speak right away. When she finally did, her voice carried the weight of a prayer. "Some souls," she said, "don't stay lost. They just take the long way home." Silas didn't answer. He only nodded, eyes lingering on the dog. Hollow's fur glowed like sunlight against snow. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the pines, Silas sat on the porch with a cup of coffee gone cold in his hands. Elsie played in the snow nearby, her laughter carrying through the quiet like music he hadn't known he missed. Hollow lay at his feet, head resting on his boots, content. The sky was a wash of pink and silver, soft and forgiving. Silas looked down at the dog. "You saved us both," he said. "Guess I was the one who needed keeping." Hollow's tail moved once in reply, slow and steady. The wind softened, brushing through the trees like a whispered hymn. For the first time since the tragedy that had broken him, Silas felt no need to run from the silence. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full of breath, of warmth, of the fragile, ordinary miracle of being found, and somewhere in that stillness, he thought he heard a familiar voice, his daughter's, Or maybe just the echo of love itself saying, "See, Daddy, he came back." Silas closed his eyes, letting the sound linger. The snow fell lighter now, soft as forgiveness. He reached down, resting his hand on Hollow's back, and whispered to the quiet night, "Some love doesn't die. It just finds another way home." The wind carried it away, gentle and final, as the stars bloomed overhead, tiny fires in a sky learning how to hope again. If you believe that love, in any form, finds its way back eventually, subscribe and let the story live a little longer inside you.